Hello my loves, I'm Ellie Frost. Thank you so much for being on my channel where we are talking about the multi-dimensional approach to rapidly and radically healing and transforming during and after narcissistic abuse. Now, I'm going to talk about narcissistic family dynamics and some of the emotional stuff that comes up for us, right? So I'll tell you some of my stories. I also want to talk to you about energetic healing, because some of you might not even understand what that is. Some people will say, you know, where's it coming from? People have asked me, what does it mean to be a channel? I believe you channel from Source, God, the Divine, Holy Spirit, absolute purest energy, if that's your intention. I would never, ever, and I don't agree with people who do any kind of spells or things against humanity, things against people's free will. I disagree with all of that. But as a pure channel, you surrender to receiving an energy that is pure, right? Working through you. That's how I describe that. I'll tell you challenging family dynamics. So I grew up in an abusive household, narcissistic parents, very strange. And I'll tell you some stories that were really significant in my life. One was I got very sick at age 15. I had a kidney condition. I was peeing blood and I was on antibiotics all the time. I got immune to antibiotics. The doctor said, the next time you get this, and it was coming on every 2-3 weeks, you're going to have to go on kidney dialysis and probably have an operation. Yeah? I haven't had an operation to this day, but that's when I started really being aware of healing myself and channeling. Not that I knew what to do with it yet. Making a decision about our lives, trusting myself, and the emotional component that leads to physical illness. So when they said to me, you're going to go and have an operation, I've not had an operation to this date, or a kidney problem, every cell of my being said no. And I started praying and I opened my channel more, I guess, my awareness, my information coming through me. I had information like downloads come through me. I've always been a channel, right? For information from the divine. I wasn't psychic. I was intuitive and I wasn't as psychic as I am now. I've consciously developed my channel. But like, I knew it was an emotional issue. I knew that this physical illness, I knew it was an emotional issue. So I started being open to healing it. I knew I was not going to have an operation. That wasn't going to be it. And it wasn't immediate, but over time, I started healing it. And I started releasing emotions in my body, literally. What had happened in my case was, I honestly swear, like, it was so painful for me to pee, and like I was in such agony, and it was scary, but it was because I wasn't feeling the emotions that I had stored from my childhood. I started understanding that and going back into memories and processing and healing the emotions. I know this might sound strange, but that's what I honestly did. I don't know how I knew to do it. I channeled from God. That was the truth. I healed that condition with my energy, with my awareness, and also using the channel I have to heal myself. The next time I ever used energy healing in a channel was when my mum was ill. So when I'm 21, my mum has a blood clot on her brain and she goes into intensive care. When I get to the hospital at 3 o'clock, and I knew that night, I'd gone out with my friends at university and I had a really strong intuition something was wrong or going to be wrong. We had planned this night out at a nightclub, girls' night. There was about 8 of us. And I, which I never did, said, I don't want to get a taxi, I want to drive. I don't know why I said it, because we'd planned it, we were going to all get drunk and have fun. I never liked driving. I'm a nervous driver, that's partly because of my father, but you know, what he was telling me about myself. But like, it wasn't something I'd offer normally. It was very unusual, but I insisted on driving. I just had a feeling. I didn't know what it was, but I had a feeling. It got to 2 or 3 in the morning and I got a phone call. My mum had gone into intensive care. And I'd need to drive 3.5 hours to the hospital where she was at, which I did. When I got to the hospital, they said she'd had a blood clot on her brain and she probably had 24 hours to live. It was highly unlikely she was going to survive. If she did, she'd be a complete vegetable. When I went into our hospital room, I sat with her and I started channeling energy with her for 4.5 hours. It was just me and her in that room. She was on life support. I didn't know how to do this, honestly. I just had an intuition to do it. And I allowed the energy to flow through me. And there, I had images while I was doing it. I could see her rising. When I got out of that room, I said to the nurse, she's not going to die and she's not going to be a vegetable. And they sat me down and said, look, I think I'm 20 years old, about 20. I think I must have been 20, not even 21 at that point. She said, we're going to get someone in to talk to you, a grief officer, and anyone else if you want to see a priest, because we know that you're in denial and you're not dealing with the facts. And I said, she's not going to die. I don't know how I knew this. It wasn't arrogance. I just knew in every cell of my being, she's not going to be a vegetable. And so they were trying to get these people in to see my mental health because they thought I was crazy. But the long story short, she survived it. She survived it, decades afterwards. Not a vegetable, and she came off life support, and she came off in the way I'd seen, ripping off the equipment, which is dangerous because you've got something down your throat, So there was all the alarm bells going off. I was right. And I channeled something, but I'd only in the recent years really acknowledged that's what happened. I still didn't know what I was doing. It took me many years where I trained as a Reiki healer, theta healer, all sorts of things outside my business job. I had a high up business role as a director of companies where they were for socially conscious businesses. I've always been pro-humanity. But I do so many things after that to open my channel. I wanted to expand it more. I didn't really understand what it was I could do with people. I was very conflicted when my mum was ill. She was very abusive to me as a child. I was extremely scared of her. So while she was ill, it was such a weird experience because I had so many conflicting feelings around my mother. So if any of you that are caring for a narcissistic parent, an abusive parent, it brings up a lot, right? I understand when people say to me, I know this person's siphoning my energy, draining me, making me feel awful, but it's an elderly person or someone who isn't too well and you feel very obliged. I do still feel you should limit your contact with them. I do. Because honestly, for years and years of my life still, I went and cared for my mum, did things for her, and it always affected my health. During this time, so let's bring in my dad in the equation, complete narcissist. I was living in London because I was studying there. But I had to go back. So I wasn't allowed in their house since I went to university. He had remarried. My mum had remarried. So I had nowhere to go at Christmas, nowhere to go at Easter. I mean, they were just unbelievable in how they treated me. He married someone who's also really not a nice person, and another abusive person. So it wasn't an easy situation. It just left me, I used to pretend to my friends I had somewhere to go because I was so ashamed. And then I would sneak back to the student house. One time I got caught by one of my friends and I was so embarrassed. I just felt ashamed of myself. I thought there was something very wrong with me, that my parents would treat me that way. That aside, I'd gone to stay in his house with his new wife for one night with my brother when my mum was first in hospital that night. When I got back, it was late, it was early in the morning when we got back. This new wife in the morning said, I'm not having your children here, all this stuff. And so he then dropped me off with my half-sister, who I didn't know very well at the time. He's been married 4 times. I didn't know her, but she let me and brother stay there. After 2.5 weeks or 3 weeks sitting by the hospital with my mum, my mum was recovering now, and I wanted to drive back to university just to get a few things. So on that car drive, I decided to call my father, right? And I've got a lot of emotions about him too. Because I didn't know what to do with any of them at the time. I didn't know how to process them. But I never spoke up to him. There's 2 times in my life I spoke up to him. It was this time, and pretty much the last time we ever spoke face to face was when he was bullying in my apartment in London, and I told him he would not speak to me like that ever again. But in this instance, I'd called him in the car to say, I can't believe it's been 4 weeks. You've left me to look after my brother, who's also very narcissistic. My mum was supposed to be dying and has been severely ill. You just abandoned us. We don't even know the person we're staying with. I know it's your daughter, but we hardly know her. And you haven't even called us. He didn't even call me. Discarded me completely. Because why? Something stressful's happening. He doesn't want to deal with it. That's terrible. I'm excellent. You know, he'll only talk about me as if he loves me when I'm the A-grade student. He can boast, but he treated me terribly all the time. And of course, he discarded me because there was a problem. And Josh, my brother. So he was also, I mean, Josh got worse after this, worse than ever. He was the absolute apple of my mum's eye. Even though she was very abusive to me, she wasn't to him. But he was always dark side. So because I've confronted him, he's enraged. He's screaming at me down the phone. He then puts me onto his secretary and says, I won't talk to you. You should talk to the secretary because I'm not allowed to have an emotion. And I tried to explain to her that I was just very upset that he'd left us and just, how could he just leave us in the middle of all of this in a strange house and, you know, put it all on me to look after everyone, and why didn't he even call me to see if I was okay? All this, you know, just how I felt. I never asked him for anything much. Because you have very low expectations when you've got narcissists around you, but I did feel strongly about this. Anyway, so I get off the phone to her because there's nothing this secretary can do. And it's the first time in my life I had a panic attack. It was really bad. And I was in the car. So I know that my feet and my hands are going tingly. I can't feel them properly and I couldn't breathe properly. So I see a gas station, I'm on a motorway, freeway, and I pull over and I go in and say to them, I do not know what's happening to me. I can hardly breathe and I can't feel my body, I can't feel my hands and feet, and I don't think I can stand up. So the garage call an ambulance. I go to the hospital, a different hospital because I'm on my way back to London, and the nurse calms me down and says, you know, you're having a panic attack, what's happening in your life? And I said, oh, my mum's been severely ill, I'm going to give up university. I took so much time out of my last year at university because of what was going on with my mum. I still took my exams, but I mean, I'd missed most of the year. I did well, not as well as I could have done, but I missed most of it to care for her. So, but I wanted to go and get my things. I called my dad and I got shouted at, and I told her what had happened. And she calmed me down and said, you're having a panic attack. And it's okay, it's relatable from what you're going through. So she says, where are you staying outside of university? And I said, oh, I'd been staying with my dad's daughter and her husband, so my brother-in-law, their half-brother-in-law, different mother. And she goes, right, I'm going to call them. So she calls them. My brother-in-law is a great guy. He said, I'm going to pick you up. So we don't talk now, though, because I won't speak to my father, and it's a big bridge in our lives. So she calls him, but he decides to call my dad because he feels it's not honourable for a man and a father just to not come as well. He thought my dad should come as well. So my dad comes into this hospital. He's screaming through it. What he's screaming is section her. She's mental. She's crazy. You should section her, put her in a mental asylum. That's what he was saying, right? I'm a straight A student. All I've done is call him out and say, you know, I wanted to talk. I was upset. I never did it in my whole life. It's the first time, and the second time, as I say, it ended our relationship. Not because I said it had to end our relationship, because I said I wouldn't allow this dynamic. And of course, for him, if I wasn't going to play and let him bully me, in his mind, there's no relationship there. Right, he wasn't prepared to change, like I talk about, they won't change or do anything different. So in this scenario, I'm now shocked. I don't know what to do. I'm wondering, maybe I will get sectioned because I'm still quite young. The nurse literally stands up. She's absolutely furious. The nurse is now, my dad is walking in. He's quite a heavy guy, right? Walking in this hospital, screaming all this stuff. She is now walking in right up into his chest. And she says, there's absolutely nothing wrong with your daughter. You need to get out of the hospital. That didn't make me understand how bad it was in terms of what he was doing. But I was quite shocked at how, I mean, this woman literally stood up and you know, wasn't even, I mean, my dad would con everyone, you know, charismatic, everyone thought he was great. He would boast about all his kids as if he was a father to them, which he wasn't, you know, and he would abuse, I mean, I got the most of it. I was the closest to him. I was the one that cared for both of them the most. I did the most for them. This is what I'm saying. I understand when you've been years in it, but honestly, it doesn't get any better. and you just ruin your life. You just give your life away. That's what I did for so many years, because I was the one that was the kindest and was going to put up with it and would tolerate it and make excuses for it. But anyway, she tells him to get out of the hospital and never come back. So he's now banished, and I go home with my brother-in-law, and then I do make it up to university. But why am I sharing it? Just the bonkers of the dynamic, that was normalised to me. I still was more confused about the whole thing than thinking of what they were. And I spent years after that, years and years, feeling so conflicted when I saw my mother, because now she was always never quite the same, but it didn't undo what she did to me, and she always made me feel bad, and she always would say things that weren't very nice to me. My dad, I let him carry on for years, and then it never changed. And then one day I told him I wasn't going to talk to me like that again, and because it was really affecting my mental health, and he just threw me away. So what would I say about it? If you're dealing with narcissists, whatever reason we've got, do I regret the things I did to care for them? Would I do it again in hindsight? I would say it doesn't make any difference to their life. We have so much heaviness on us where we think, I've got to do it, I'm the only one to support. I did it with my brother. My brother is a terrible narcissist. Like, oh gosh, is he mean? And he knew what he was, very young. I think I've told this on a video before. He sat down with me at 7 and said, you know, the difference between you and me, Ellie, is you're the good angel and I'm the bad angel. And the thing with you is you've got a conscience and I don't. And he used to always look at me as inferior because of that. And he did some terrible things to me and other people. I made excuses for him my whole life. Well, not my whole life, until now. You know, until, well, quite a few years ago. But they don't change. We think we're the only one to save them and rescue them. We feel obliged. We don't want to live with our own guilt. We think it's on us. But honestly, I feel like we're putting too much responsibility on ourselves a lot of the time because we want to be the good daughter. Yeah, that's the thing. I wanted to be a good daughter no matter what, but those roles don't apply in these dynamics, and honestly, it doesn't change over time. And if you are the one that's supporting them when they're abusive, now I've got extreme stories, so you might not have the same situation, but there is always another way that they can be taken care of. There's always a way where you can limit your exposure. The damage it does to you and what it costs you in your life overall is a very long thing. And ultimately, they'll always discard you. My mother, when things got hard in my life, it told me not to speak to her until things got better, after everything I'd done for her. Doesn't make any difference to them, you see? So it's not a relationship, because a relationship is two ways. It's a kind of, I wouldn't even say it's an act of service, because it comes at such a cost to you. So if you're dealing with the burden of looking after your family members, I would just understand that a lot of the thing we're avoiding is our own guilt and shame. But when you see it for what it really, but that nurse saw who my dad was. Most of the community around me didn't, but she did straight away. She didn't sit for a second and think I was mentally ill. She thought there was something very wrong with this man, especially in the context of what was going on in my life. But I never saw it like that. I believed him. So, well, for a while. I don't think your life was meant to be a sacrifice. I sacrificed a lot of mine. I'm definitely older than I look. So I sacrificed so much of mine unnecessarily. It didn't make any difference. Didn't build the relationship with them. Yeah, someone else could have done it. They'd have found a way to get sorted out, to get taken care of. They didn't need me in the way that I was over caring for them, because I was still trying to have a relationship that didn't exist. That's what I'd say. So if you're dealing with that, understand what's really your own guilt and fantasy and what's the real facts, because when you do limit your life in these cycles, you do sacrifice more than what required of you. It's only your choice, but most of the time it's guilt holding you back. Teachers and sovereign, we don't want to do things just from guilt, right? It's not expansive for them or you. If they really don't have anyone else to care for them, then there's always a way. There's always a way. But it shouldn't be at the cost of your life, the cost of your mental health, the cost of your well-being. There's always a better way as well. All right, my loves, lots of love. I'll speak to you home. Speak to you soon.